Good evening, everybody. Welcome into the Villanova Basketball Report. It's live here on BLS. Bob Long, Kevin Long, and boy, we are excited to get after it this week because there's so much to talk about with Villanova basketball, specifically a highly entertaining win against Marquette, 85-82, a game that went back and forth all afternoon long, and what we thought was going to be a matchup between Jalen Brunson and Marcus Howard really became a matchup between Andrew Rousey and Jalen Brunson as they went back and forth the entire night. Jalen Brunson with 31 points. Andrew Rousey, he had 29, but really, Kevin, they did it in so many different ways. And I think the way that Andrew Rousey beat them at times was certainly the defense being susceptible without Phil Booth. We're going to get into all of that today. We're going to have on the whiteboard right behind us here, we're going to have an X's and O's, a V's and O's as we call it, segment where we break down where the Villanova defense broke down, and then also how Jalen Brunson created his own shot, really more so than he has all season long.
Yeah, and it's really a testament of how they're going to have to play the rest of the year. You mentioned it before, Phil Booth. That's a huge loss for the Cats for, if not the rest of this year, at least until March Madness time rolls around. So we really got a glimpse of how Villanova is going to play the rest of this year, how they're going to utilize their guards, their limited guards that they have. Jalen Brunson and Donte DiVincenzo are really going to have to take over for this team. Jalen Brunson, has obviously been a leader for this team for a long time, but his role is even going to change more now without Phil Booth, without having that additional leader. Now he has to be the guy who's taking the shots and stepping up and hitting a jumper, just, walking right up to the top of the key, taking shots and not being the guy who distributes the ball. And Donte DiVincenzo, we're going to see him take on a much larger role than we're used to, a lot more ball handling. He'll continue to shoot the shot like he always has, but he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot more and will be less of an off-ball guy than we've seen so far this year.
We're live on Facebook here. We're live on Ustream as we always are. We just welcomed a new audience from Twitter Live, Periscope, so certainly appreciate that, and you can get involved with this show. Your thoughts on Villanova basketball, your thoughts on college basketball as a whole. And, of course, when we get into the V's and O's segment, which will be next here on our show, we're going to get to the whiteboard behind us and go through some of those concepts. So let's start by breaking down the game itself without going to the whiteboard, Kevin. Marquette did a great job spacing the floor against Villanova and making things difficult. I mean, he only had a couple three-point baskets, but Kane was able to find seams in the defense, just stand there and wait to shoot it from deep. He hit a couple of shots from deep. And also Andrew Rousey, a guy who can simply pull it up at any time, use that leverage as Nova guys needed to come out and defend that three as a way to get to the basket. The one guy we didn't see as much from was Marcus Howard.
Yeah.
Just 5 for 18 from the floor and did not hit a shot in the second half from the field or from the free throw line. Now, what Villanova did in the second half, and we talked about this going into this game last week, is that Marcus Howard is by far the best player. Who do you put against him? Villanova started out by playing Jalen Brunson in exclusively man-to-man defense. They stayed in that man-to-man look the whole game, but finally you see what a Mikal Bridges can do for you defensively. Marcus Howard a little bit lengthier than some of the other guards that they've played, or at least it seems that way with the way he plays the game. So you put Mikal Bridges on him, and all of a sudden, there was nothing he could do. And I think that is really important for the Cats to know. Certainly they knew that going in, that Mikal Bridges is an unbelievable defender, but that you can put that on a slightly long guard and have that stop the other team's best player.
Yeah, absolutely. Villanova came in and they did what they wanted to do. They wanted to focus on Marcus Howard, and they really wanted to shut him down, and they felt if they could do that, they would have a good chance to win this game. Now, what they didn't factor in was Andrew Rousey having the game that he had. And, I agree with you that Mikal Bridges is the guy to cover Marcus Howard in that situation, and he should have been doing it from the start. You figure your two most athletic and best defenders are Mikal Bridges and Donte DiVincenzo on this team. So those need to be the guys. You have a Marcus Howard and Andrew Rousey. Donte and Mikal need to be the guys covering them. So, it really worked out for Nova at the end. They weren't able to stop Andrew Rousey. Didn't really have a whole lot of answers for him, but I would have liked to have seen Dante DiVincenzo locking down on him a little bit better. I think he would have done a lot better than maybe Jalen Brunson did throughout that game.
Sure. Marquette, a 31 for 61 day from the floor. 11 of 24 from beyond the three-point line, and relatively efficient. Of course, you're going to see that when you have 82 points on the board against this Villanova defense. You can see that. Jay Wright goes to the half, though. They had given up 44 points and says, we're not playing any defense whatsoever. And this isn't a new concept. It's a Marquette team that had stung Villanova. Was that last year or was that 2 years ago where they beat them on the road at Marquette? I think it was last year, actually, when they were the number one team in the country. Mm-hmm. Even this year, put up 90 points against the Cats at the Wells Fargo Center. And they really do. They space the ball well. I mentioned Andrew Rousey. He's been a lot better at home than he has been on the road. Marcus Howard, just the opposite, much better on the road than he has been at home. And they really haven't been able to jive together very often. And so this is a Marquette team that I think has two very, very good scorers and could be a good team into March, and showed it the way they played against the number one team in the country. Kevin, I didn't think that Villanova played particularly bad.
No, I would agree with you. They didn't play particularly bad. The other guy that we don't mention that didn't have as great of a game is Sam Hauser. He's been a great player for them all year. This is a Marquette team that I think is dangerous coming into this. So last week in preparing for the Marquette game, I was looking through some of their schedule leading up to the Villanova game. Here's some of the teams that they have already played so far in Big East play. So they had Xavier and Nova last week. They had 6 losses coming into the week, 1 to Villanova previously, 1 to Purdue, 1 to Xavier, and 1 to Wichita State. So now they have all those teams out of their way in Big East play, and they have the likes of St. John's and Providence and Seton Hall coming up, all very winnable games. If they're able to take care of business against some of those mid-tier Big East teams, and then obviously take care of, the DePauls of the world and teams like that, this is a team that definitely has a chance to make a run into March here. You get hot in the late stretch of games, and you're going into the Big East tournament. You're able to rip off a few more wins, maybe make a semifinal appearance in the Big East tournament. You got yourself another Big East team in the NCAA tournament. So I really like to see, or I think they'll get hot towards the end of this year just due to the weakness of their schedule and make a run into March here.
I think it's a great point on Marquette. We'll switch gears to this Villanova team who, coming into the game, the number one team in the country, remains that after this win, and of course is at the top of everybody's bracketology board. But in terms of making a deep run into March, I think that was compromised, at least in the minds of some pundits. In that, with Phil Booth breaking his hand again, we touched on it right before this game as we did our show on Wednesday of last week. What will life be without Phil Booth? And we saw Colin Gillespie hit a big three-point play that turned into a four-point play as he was fouled from deep. But beyond that, just did not have a very good game. Fumbled the ball in the backcourt, simply pitch and catch, couldn't come up with it. Was beaten defensively. We're going to break some of that down in our V's and O's segment. And just generally, he didn't seem as if he was changing from that deferential role that we talked about last week that he straight up needs to snap out of. So, what will the life without Phil Booth be? I think you're going to see a lot of offensive concepts the way you did against Marquette as well, and we'll break that down in V's and O's. 8 assists on 29 field goals. We're going to explain why they didn't assist on as many field goals, but why they were still team-driven shots. And that's, I think, what life without Phil Booth is going to be. It's not going to be that same floor spacing, ball movement, at least not right away as you work a Colin Gillespie into the mix. Or, if not, you need an extra big guy on the floor to replace Phil Booth simply because of that lack of depth.
Mm-hmm. And life without Phil Booth really comes down to the freshmen that we have right now. So you got Omari Spelman, you have Colin Gillespie, you have Demir Cosby-Roundtree. They're part of the 7-man rotation right now. And the other 4 guys, you have Eric Paschal, Mikal Bridges, Jalen Brunson, and Dante DiVincenzo. In that game, out of the 85 points that were scored, 80 of them were by the 4 upperclassmen. Jalen, Dante, Eric, and and McHale. Right?
Omari
Yes.
Spelman had 2.
Omari Spelman had 2. So you're looking
Actually,
at your
wait
4.
a second. But okay. But what about Colin Gillespie? Oh, he missed the free throw. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's right. He didn't hit.
So he had 3
right.
points and Demir had 0, I believe.
Yeah,
Was
that would make sense.
Yeah. So that was it. 80 points from those 4 guys. That's not going to work. That's not a recipe for success in March. So you really need to see a lot more. Omari has been a lot better in most of those games. He's turned into a very reliable player, one of our top players for a couple of years down the road here. But you can't afford to have that from Omari anymore. It's a 5-point game with Marquette, playing fairly good defense, shutting down Marcus Howard. You really need a guy like Omari Spelman to be able to step up in those times. It didn't seem like he played a whole lot of minutes. Need him in the game a lot more.
He will. I think he will. I think he's, I hate to say it, but even more ready than like an Eric Paschal is right now. I think you're counting on Omari Spelman more than you're counting on.
Yeah, absolutely. And this was just, this was the first situation where we had a game without Phil Booth, and then it just happened that our 3 freshmen, all essentially did not contribute to this win. And you're relying on your upperclassmen, and that's what happens. You lose a leader like Phil Booth, and you rely on your other upperclassmen to step up. But you really need to see more especially out of Colin. I understand it's very difficult being in the situation that he's in. But we really, as a community, Villanova, the entire school, need Colin Gillespie to step up right now. This is his time to put up or shut up, if you will. He needs to make his mark right now if this team is going to have any chance to go deep into March.
And I think you're saying this, Kevin, but just to clarify, we understand that it wasn't necessarily going to happen in the first game that Phil Booth was out of the lineup, right? He actually has some time now as the season draws toward the close to begin to develop that. And I think we know that that's not supposed to happen immediately with a freshman, even somebody that came in, I thought, as ready as he was for the college game. Maybe physically he isn't quite where he will be, but in terms of mentally and just understanding running the point guard in the high school level at the highest level, I think he's generally ready to play college basketball. All that said, it's going to take some time, and I think it's okay that it's going to take some time for Colin Gillespie. Now, the other guy to talk about, though, is Eric Paschal, because Eric Paschal, you mentioned stepping up and the upperclassmen stepping up. He's gone from a tentative 1 for 23 3-point shooter on the year up to over 30% now for the year. So for those of you doing math at home, he was under 5% for a good stretch of the year, and has just lit it up since then at well over a 40%, actually over a 50% clip over the last couple of games from three-point land. And he's looked a lot more confident in that shot, and he looks more confident in general. Will he have the occasional kind of dumb foul? Yes, he will. He just gets a little aggressive, a little excited out there, Eric Paschal, but he's been really good for this team. And we talked about life without Phil Booth. There's indications that perhaps life without Phil Booth won't go deep into March, and that's certainly a good thing, but we don't know exactly what state he'll come back. Remember, it was the shooting hand that he did, in fact, break. So, I wouldn't count on him, just like Colin Gillespie came back from a broken hand, and as a freshman, of course, but wasn't quite ready to go. Phil Booth may need a game or two as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The Villanova's going to need Eric Paschal to stretch the floor for them a little bit. He's turned into quite the athlete, quite the jack of all trades. He really does a lot for you. We joke a lot about sometimes looking lost out there, dumb fouls. You're going to get all that with Eric Paschal, but if you have a guy who's as powerful as him, he dribbles the ball fairly well. He was the guy at Fordham. It's a A10 school, not anywhere near the Big East powers are today, but we need a guy. You need him to be able to handle the ball now a little bit more. Dante is not really a true ball handler, so if you have a guy like Eric that can help you out, really it's Jalen and Colin at this point, and Colin is not showed to be completely reliable at this point. So having an extra ball handler out there, and Eric Paschal, a guy who can drive and slam it down and hit an occasional three, is definitely something that Villanova is going to need.
This is the Villanova Basketball Report. We're going to take a quick break and come back for a really fun segment. It's called V's and O's. And For those of you on Facebook or on Twitter, give us a shout. We'll certainly get you on the air with your comments or questions. Bob Long, Kevin Long, and we'll be right back on that whiteboard behind us, breaking everything down. Philadelphia sold the winningest team in Philadelphia. Bob Long Sports is your spot for live video pregame shows with Bob Long, Eric Nash, and Rob Stott. We even have the opportunity to talk with the AFL Commissioner, Scott Butera. We appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me. You do a terrific job, and God bless all of you and the folks in Philadelphia. I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks, Scott.
Appreciate it.
Tune in before every home game for the Philadelphia Soul official pregame show on Bob Long Sports.
Ford is Mayfair's neighborhood Ford store.
Nobody knows your neighborhood like Dunphy Ford.
Nearly 40 years.
Right here on Frankfurt Avenue.
Generation after generation, our neighbors continue to be our customers. We have access to the cars and trucks you want with financing you need.
Dunphy Ford is Northeast Philly's first choice for America's #1 brand. 7700 Frankfurt Avenue in Mayfair. Online at www.dumpyford.com.
Come experience the Dumpy difference. You'll be glad you did.
What does your character look like? Does it bounce back after each setback? Does it stand out by standing up? Does it make good on good intentions? Character is invisible until it's not. Only through action will the world know what it's made of, what you're made of. Find out how you can strengthen the character of your community alongside empowered veterans and families of the fallen at travismanion.org.
People ask me why I'm giving up a year of my life to help kids. I say, who says I'm giving up anything?
If kids who drop out are 8 times more likely to end up in prison, do we open more prisons or mines?
What's going on, folks? This is Bob Long from Bob Long Sports. We're live here at the Wells Fargo Center before each and every Philadelphia Soul home game. We record this now before Arena Bowl 30, and the Philadelphia Soul, the winningest team in Philadelphia. Bob Long Sports is your spot for live video pregame shows with Bob Long, Eric Nash, and Rob Stott. We even have the opportunity to talk with the AFL Commissioner, Scott Butera. We appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me. You do a terrific job, and God bless all of you and the folks in Philadelphia. I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks, Scott.
Appreciate it.
Tune in before every home game for the Philadelphia Soul official pregame show on Bob Long Sports. Welcome back, everybody. This is V's and O's, our newest segment here on the Villanova Basketball Report. We're going to get into some of the offensive and defensive concepts that Villanova got into, and particularly where they got schooled a little bit defensively. But offensively, without Phil Booth, everything's going to change for this team, and let's talk about it right now. Phil Booth was a guy that when Villanova is out behind the three-point line, when they're working it around, they're kind of playing that 4-out, 1-in defense. Omari Spelman is right about there. And then you have Mikal Bridges. And then you have, let's say, Eric Paschal down here. Jalen Brunson and Phil Booth. Right? They're working it around the key. Phil Booth can cut in here, find a cutting Eric Paschal, or whether he stays back from deep. You know, it's very free-flowing, the offense that Villanova had been running with Phil Booth. But I mentioned how the offense changed against Marquette. Just 8 assists with 29 field goals. That is not what Villanova has traditionally done, but we're going to take a look at one of their most efficient and effective offensive plays, and you've seen it a little bit before. Mikal Bridges, let's say he's right here with the basketball in his hand, right? And so you have Eric Paschal, Omari Spelman in his normal spot, and you have another guard, Dante DiVincenzo, here. Jalen Brunson has just brought the ball up the floor. And he passes it off to Mikal Bridges. He decides what's he going to do. But look at the important thing here. Every one of these guys is on this side of the floor. So what happens next? Jalen Brunson knows that he's the best back-down guard in the league, the best post-up guy in the country. So Mikal's going to bring the basketball this way, hand it off to Jalen, and Jalen's going to continue on this way. So now your offense looks a lot like this. Jalen is now right here against the man, and Mikal Bridges clears out. So now you have all the defenders over here as well for Marquette. So let's say defender 1, defender 2, defender 3. Now you have one-on-one with Jalen Brunson, and this entire floor space is open. So at this point, Jalen goes to his left hand, backs down this guy all the way into this area where he can either hit a cutting guy to the basket or they can stay cleared out, and he can just get in here, turn around, and fire. That was very effective and very efficient for Villanova. So while you say, all right, that's not assist-oriented basketball, you're certainly right about that. But what it is still team basketball and a new way for Villanova. Again, we've seen this before out of Villanova, but we're going to see a lot more of that as opposed to the free-flowing 15 assists on 25 field goals type of thing. So that's one. Let's talk about Omari Spelman now, because Spelman defensively, Kevin talked about it in the previous segment, he wasn't all that great offensively, only the 2 points, but it was defensively where he really got burned. We're still going to keep blue for Villanova. Andrew Rousey or Marcus Howard is right here. Let's say Howard is the guy. He's defended by, let's say, Jalen Brunson, who, while he's a phenomenal player, still doesn't have that reach or length, and that's why they moved to Mikal Bridges. But for this point, we're still the first half, and it's Jalen Brunson. Omari Spelman is guarding one of the bigs inside. Here's Spelman right here. This big comes up and sets a high ball screen. Jalen Brunson, knowing that the way Villanova has played defense and the game plan was to switch liberally, stays with the big guy. So it's on Omari Spelman to come up here as this guy comes as the guard. Let's say it's Howard. Spelman has to come up and meet him right here as this big crashes to the hole, and it's Jalen Brunson's job to try to either front him or get on the side, essentially prevent the over-the-top with, say, a Mikal Bridges able to come and intercept an over-the-top pass. But really, right here is where the crux of everything is happening. What happened on Sunday afternoon is Omari Spelman, when he got about right here, was indecisive. And that's exactly the point. You can't be indecisive because you're either going to get beaten to the hole on a roll or this guy's going to pop and fire from distance. And that's exactly what happened a couple of times during that game. Kevin, you want to take me while I erase some of this? What do you think about some of this, and what did you see?
Yeah, so going back to the offensive side of the ball, talking about Jalen Brunson and getting him into more open space, that's really going to be the new role that he's going to take on. Like you said before, it's a more free-flowing offense. You have 5 guys touching the ball just about every possession. You have people cutting to the basket constantly, getting open in space. But now you have Jalen Brunson, who's going to now have to take these opportunities for himself. Jay's going to be drawing up a lot more plays to get him in space, whether it's handing off the ball to guys and setting a pick for him. Whatever he's going to have to do, Jalen Brunson is going to be the guy that is shooting the ball now and not setting everyone else up for a good shot. So it's going to be his team to take the bull by the horns and really just carry this team by himself. He's going to shoot the ball. He's going to be involved in every single play, whereas some of the offense was able to run through Phil previously. So like you said, Jalen Brunson is going to have to do it all for this team.
All right, last concept here, transition defense. Our last concept in last week's broadcast was the transition offense and the fact that you had the bigs running the floor and the guards with that vision. Defensively, things were not as good for Villanova. And obviously the first thing you need to do, you taught this at the rec level, is to stop the basketball. So Villanova certainly does that. The issue when they're switching so liberally in the half court, and by and large that did not work for them, is that when you're trying to get back and contain somebody in the front court, a lot of times they were just too aggressive. So you have Andrew Rousey coming down the floor with the basketball. We're going to make him red since he's not Villanova. Villanova's blue here. Rousey comes down the floor somewhat in transition. Brunson is making his way back. Paschal's making his way back. Out comes Kane. And he spotted up twice in the second half and simply hit an open three because Omari Spelman was trying to contain this guy. Two guys fell to Rousey, and Kane was wide open. On the other side, and this, I probably should have gone in the opposite order, frankly, Kev, because the fact that Kane was so open is because this, what I'm about to do, happened a lot initially. Rousey coming back. Gets to about here, the top portion of the whiteboard, NBA 3 range, and then some. Guys, this was a knockdown shooter at UNC Wilmington. He came into Marquette this year and has last year and had a great year this year. He can light it up from distance. You need to get on this guy as soon as he gets across midcourt. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. This same concept applies for Marcus Howard, who didn't have as great of a game, but you've seen him put up 40-plus points. You need to guard him as soon as he crosses half court. And in the middle stages of the second half, Villanova simply would not stop the basketball. They were getting Spelman back in here. They were getting Paschal in this area to guard a three at just right at the edge of the three-point line versus a shot from the parking lot. And so Villanova got beat by this initially, the overtop by Rousey, which continued to open up the defense. They would commit a second guy up here if you're Villanova, leaving Kane wide open here, this spot where he absolutely drilled shots over the course of the game. So transition defense as well as the high ball screen, which is a very NBA-type concept. You're seeing a lot of that right now. Villanova uses the high ball screen as well, and we can break that down next week because they're going to have, Kev, two really interesting matchups against Seton Hall and Creighton that we can talk about in the second half of the show, where they have such interesting defensive concepts. I mean, Creighton just lost their big guy, but Seton Hall, they have Sonogo. They still have Angel Delgado, who just became the Big East leading rebounder in the history of the conference. They have guys that you can actually exploit. And then we're going to talk about a guy from Creighton who hasn't had to be that primary big, who's now going to have to guard Omari Spelman. I think Villanova's going to go to the high ball screen quite often in order to beat those two teams. So we'll break that concept down next week. But that's been our V's and O's segment tonight. Certainly hope you enjoyed it. And we're going to come back on the other side. This is BLS and the Villanova Basketball Report.
Ford is Mayfair's neighborhood Ford store.
Nobody knows your neighborhood like Dunphy Ford.
Nearly 40 years.
Right here on Frankfurt Avenue.
Generation after generation. Our neighbors continue to be our customers. We have access to the cars and trucks you want with financing you need.
Dunphy Ford is Northeast Philly's first choice for America's #1 brand. 7700 Frankfurt Avenue in Mayfair. Online at www.dumpyford.com.
Come experience the Dumpy difference. You'll be glad you did.
What does your character look like? Does it bounce back after each setback? Does it stand out by standing up? Does it make good on good intentions? Character is invisible until it's not. Only through action will the world know what it's made of, what you're made of. Find out how you can strengthen the character of your community alongside empowered veterans and families of the fallen at travismanion.org.
People ask me why I'm giving up a year of my life to help kids. I say, who says I'm giving up anything?
If kids who drop out are 8 times more likely to end up in prison, do we open more prisons or minds?
Welcome back, everybody. This is the Villanova Basketball Report, live here on BLS. Bob Long, Kevin Long. Certainly hope you enjoyed the V's and O's segment that we've done here this evening. But, Kevin, it's time to take those concepts back to the floor, right? They take on Creighton on Thursday night. It's a 6:30 tip, everybody's favorite. And then they go to Seton Hall this weekend. So, Kevin, of the concepts you saw back there, what stuck out to you most, either from a positive or maybe an opportunity/negative standpoint?
So the thing that stood out to me was at the end when you were talking about, you have a guy like Marcus Howard, a guy who has limitless range. He can also drive to the basket. He can do a lot of things to beat you, and you have a guy like Jalen Brunson on him. Now, I think that limits you as a team when you have a guy who's not necessarily as big as a Mikal Bridges or a Dante DiVincenzo, because you really need to play right up on him. He doesn't have the luxury of giving him a little bit of space and then being able to close out on him as quickly as a Mikal Bridges would. So, you're much more limited with a Jalen Brunson in that, he can decide to drive right by you, or Jalen Brunson commits to staying back on him, and then he pulls up and shoots a three. So that really goes to our point that we had talked about earlier in the show about having Dante and Mikal playing defense on the opponent's best offensive players. We talked about having Jalen Brunson on him to start the game, and why that may or may not have worked out at first. I think that length that Dante and Mikal have are a big difference for them, and we need to play those guys in man defense against some of the best players that we're going to be seeing here.
Interesting thought here came from the message board, the text board / Facebook, Twitter. You can get at us either on our live Facebook feed or our Periscope feed. Ryan Lennox, the halftime voice for 610 Sports, Villanova Basketball Radio. Certainly appreciate him checking in. And his thought is that Omari Spelman needs the basketball more. So this may be an extension of our V's and O's segment, Kev. We teased it going into the break. Tony Hegner for Creighton on Thursday night is going to be put in a really interesting position because Martin Krampel 3 games ago tore his knee up, and he's going to be done for the year. And in the time since, Creighton has lost badly to Providence and then had single-digit victories against Georgetown and St. John's. So I don't think we know enough about what this team is going to be without Martin Krampel. He had a lot of promise, was averaging double figures per game. But more importantly than that, he was their big. He was their 6'9" guy that, if Omari Spelman came out to the top of the key to run a high ball screen, they were either going to switch or he was going to stay with him and pop out, as Omari Spelman popped out to try to shoot the three. Now, Tony Hegner, a little bit more undersized at 6'7", 6'8". He's going to be the guy put into, more uncomfortable situations here as that primary big. And I think, to Ryan's point, against Creighton specifically, Spellman's going to get the ball a lot more. I'm predicting a big day for the freshman at home against Creighton. I think that's going to be huge. All of a sudden, that gives you that second option where Jalen Brunson comes off that screen. Omari Spelman, that big guy that can certainly go back to the basket, but first and foremost, he's a guy that wants to square you up, look you in the eye, and then either drive by you to the left or shoot over the top. I think he's going to have a lot of success doing that on Thursday. I think he's a key to the game, and I certainly appreciate Ryan Lennox checking in. Once again, the halftime voice, the producer in the studio for Villanova Basketball, 610 Sports, and Whitey and Ryan.
Yeah, and Omari Spelman, at the end of the day, is the biggest difference between Villanova last year and Villanova this year. While it was great to get Phil Booth back, it really is just a player that we haven't seen at Villanova in a very long time. Not only for the fact that he can step out and shoot the three as a big guy, but that was the biggest thing that was missing, especially in that Wisconsin game last year in the second round of the tournament. We didn't have a guy that could cover Nigel Hayes. We didn't have a guy that could cover an Ethan Happ. We really were desperately needing Omari Spelman in that game, and he could have been a huge difference at that time last year, and we need him to be that difference this year. We need him to be a lockdown defender on another big, anybody that we may run into in the tournament. He has to stay step for step with that guy. He has to be able to put up points, and then he has to be able to stop him at the other end. So, yes, Omari Spelman is going to be a huge factor, and he really needs to not pick up the pace, but more so than he did in his previous game at Marquette. But he has been doing very well this year. He just needs to keep up with the consistency, because if he does have a game like that in March, we're certainly going to be in a lot more trouble than we were last Sunday.
Creighton will be a tough test for Villanova. They come in on a little bit of a slide. And as we mentioned, the loss to Providence, followed by the 2 wins against the bottom feeders in the Big East. But it's all about their backcourt, Kevin. Marcus Foster, who obviously was an unbelievable player last year, was expected to take the load when Mo Watson Jr. was out of the game. By the way, fun fact, his brother Tyrese Watson is at Bonner Prendergast here in Philadelphia. But so without Mo Watson Jr. again this year, it's been Marcus Foster taking the lead as the top scorer, and then Kyrie Thomas, those two averaging about 30 points a game, and really a big backcourt, as both of those guys are listed at 6'3" and can push things around a little bit, can use that length, and obviously are real good players, good shooters, both can get to the basket. I'm interested to see what Villanova does at a second guard position. Is it Dante DiVincenzo that plays big minutes and gets now maybe the oversized guy who wants to go guard Marcus Foster, or would Villanova continue to go back to Mikal Bridges? Because I think Toby Hegner is going to be guarded by a combination of Eric Paschal and Omari Spelman. So maybe there's an opportunity to get Mikal Bridges on a Foster or a Kyrie Thomas.
Yeah, I think this is a very similar team to the Marquette team we just saw. This is another team with 2 guys who are clearly the leaders on this team. They're clearly scoring most of the points for this team. It goes back to our V's and O's segment. We need to have Dante DiVincenzo and Mikal Bridges on those 2 players. I understand Jalen Brunson is your most reliable guy. He's your leader. Everybody rallies around him. But at the end of the day, you need to have your top defender on those 2 guys. So I really hope to see them come out in man defense with, hopefully Dante on Kyrie and Mikal on Marcus Foster.
Ooh. I'd be surprised, but it could happen. I'd be surprised if you don't have Jalen on one of them, because then I'm not sure who he's guarding necessarily. But what I think will really be interesting is then on the offensive end, Jalen Brunson will not be able to play the same game he played against Andrew Rousey and Marcus Howard, because Marcus Foster is a man. He is a big, strong guy that's every bit as tall, if not taller, than Jalen Brunson. And Jalen Brunson is not going to be able to just back him down the way he was those guys in the Marquette game. Not that he won't be successful, not that he won't be able to blow by, and not that the high pick and roll won't be effective, because I actually think that's a huge concept in this game to create some of those matchup differences. But I don't know if I see that same concept that we did in our last segment, the first offensive concept, where you clear everybody out to the left side, and then on the right wing, it's Jalen Brunson going with his right shoulder into the defender and working his way to the middle of the floor. I don't know if we're going to see that quite as much, and so I think it's going to be very entertaining to see what offense Villanova does go with.
Yeah, I'll be certainly interested to see how they get Jalen Brunson open. This is certainly not one of the better matchups that he'll see this year. Like you said, he likes to use his physicality. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but he likes to back you down in the lane. And he also likes to create some space for himself and shoot a three-pointer over top. He really is not going to have a good chance to do either of those things in this game. So we're really going to have to see someone else step up. It's going to have to be passing it off to Mikal Bridges, passing it off to Dante DiVincenzo. One of those guys is going to have to get open, and they're going to be the ones knocking down the shots in this game.
And you know what? He might just go ahead and prove us all wrong, because he's a first-round draft pick, possibly, if he chooses to go this year, and is a phenomenal player. He's crafty. He gets to the basket. But I just think this will be a little bit tougher than he's seen in the last game or two. And that's where the fun of it comes. I mean, you can draw things up on the board all you want, but Greg McDermott's doing the exact same thing out there in Omaha, Nebraska, and we'll see what they come out with.
He's one of the top National Player of the Year candidates for a reason, Bob. And, he may not have all the physicalities of an NBA prospect necessarily, although I do think that he will develop into one. But he's certainly a National Player of the Year candidate for a reason. So I think he'll find a way, some way or another. He always seems to.
All right, Seton Hall. If not a Villanova show, this might be a Seton Hall show because it has worked its way into our pick'em game, which we'll get at the tail end of the show. Absolutely destroying me about 3 times, once in your favor and twice to my detriment, as I picked them. And then when you picked them, they did quite well. 16-5, this team, a winner over DePaul. They had lost 3 out of their last 4 prior to that. Had a double-digit lead on Xavier and gave that one away at home, one of the most, we'll say, anticipated games in the history of the Prudential Center from a Seton Hall perspective. Yeah, this team, you look at their record, they have great non-conference wins. They scheduled a very tough out-of-conference and out-of-league schedule. So you look at them and say they're in a really good spot, but those close to the league, I think, see some of the issues that they've had, and they've gotten blown out a couple times where they shouldn't have. Marquette blew them out, a game where they were favored to win, and Seton Hall, they're having one of those stretches in their schedule. Kevin Willard on the record saying, listen, everybody's going to have this. We're having it now. We're happy to be having it now so that we can work through it before we get to elimination game time. I think that's a fair way to look at it because they have some of the best scorers that the game has to offer. Desi Rodriguez, Miles Powell. And by the way, Miles Powell is really the only guy we're going to talk about tonight that's not a senior. Right? Ismael Sanogo, Angel Delgado, Kadeen Carrington. I mentioned Desi Rodriguez already. These are guys with length that can get to the basket on the guard side, Rodriguez, Carrington. And then inside, Sanogo and then Angel Delgado are just really, really good players. And Angel Delgado just passed, can you guess it? For the Big East all-time rebounding mark, Angel Delgado is number 1. Who did he pass? This is for you, Tom. We're doing trivia without you.
Oh, that's a tough one. You didn't warn me we were going to do trivia tonight. I assumed Tom wasn't here. We wouldn't be doing it. Is it from a team that's currently in the Big East?
No.
No. I was going to say Hashim Thabit.
I think he left after 2 or 3 years.
Did he?
Surprised to hear you say that.
Really? I thought he stayed the whole time.
No.
Maybe it's just because the NBA didn't work out for him.
I didn't think he stayed the whole time.
Really?
Could be wrong on that. Good trivia question. No, the answer, unless you want another one.
No, go for it.
D.C. Derek Coleman, Syracuse.
That's a good one.
Yeah, a guy that just never quite made it at the next level the way he did in college. He was an absolute beast. So anyway, they're going to provide tough matchup problems for Villanova. I think they're going to go win the basketball game, but it's never easy playing this team. This team in particular, since the Big East changed, I feel like has been Villanova's nemesis, maybe with the exception of Butler.
Yeah, they've been a much improved team over the past few years. And like you said, a very senior-laden team. You have Desi Rodriguez, you have Powell, you have Carrington, Delgado.
Powell, obviously,
Powell
is
a sophomore.
Yeah.
But this team is a very experienced team. All those guys scoring at least 13 points a game. So they're really able to spread the wealth. They have a lot of guys that can contribute, a lot of guys that on any given night can go off and carry this team. So really quite shocking that they are, struggling in some of the games that they do. A team that is this senior-laden and this experience should be able to overcome, blips in the road here and there and keep moving forward and not repeat some of the same mistakes that they've had. So I really expected a lot more out of this team, and I think you can expect a lot in this game against Villanova. This is a team, if you have a lot of seniors, a team going for their last stretch here, guys that may not, maybe they'll play overseas and things like that, but may not play at the same level that they are right now afterwards. And, they really want to come out and beat Villanova that last time. You can guarantee that. I guarantee they're going to be coming out, playing hard, giving Villanova everything they got. And this is going to be a very competitive game to the end. I don't see either side really pulling this one out early.
Dave Buzzard had a guess. Patrick Ewing for the all-time leading rebounder. Kev, I'm just going to say that's a better guess than yours was.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Bob.
But Patrick Ewing, if I may, if he had just hung back and not had so many blocks, perhaps he would have the rebounding record.
Mm-hmm.
Good guess there. But no, DC, Derek Coleman,
Coleman.
prior prior to Angel Delgado, the all-time leading rebounder in Big East play. So let's get to our final segment here. It's time for Pick'em. I don't know how we did last week. Without Tom, we're completely lost. But he'll calculate 2 weeks of scores next week. Let's get to your picks this year. Remember, against the spread, if you lose, you are subtracted the differential of the points, and if the team you picked, let's say they were a favorite, they outright lost the game, you lose 10 points there as well, and everything vice versa. Go ahead.
So my first pick, I have Oklahoma over Baylor. Oklahoma is -6 in this game. I know that could be quite a shocking pick. Team that just lost 4 straight. It lost to Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Kansas, and Alabama. I just don't see that happening again against Baylor. I know they've played a lot of good teams recently, hung in there. I just see Oklahoma rebounding. They're going to start figuring this out at some point. I don't see 6 as a huge line for this game. I think they'll benefit from some of the losses that they have had in the past 2 weeks. So I like this line. I like Oklahoma to come back and sort of remember who they are. Next one I have Texas plus 7.5 over Texas Tech. So last meeting, it was at Texas. They beat Texas Tech 67-58. I think they have a good shot to at least cover in this game. If not, get myself a nice upset win over here and get a little plus 10. I think I was in the negative last week, but you never know without Tom. He's the guru. So hopefully they pull that one out and I can get a few points there. Last one I have is Butler plus 3 over Marquette. So they've been playing pretty well recently. They've had a tough stretch of games. Marquette obviously just played very strong against Villanova, and the last time that they met, Butler won 94-83 at Butler. So, like in 2 teams that won previously to their current opponents for this week, and now they have to go on the road to face those teams, and I think they should at least cover their spreads.
Okay. I like Xavier at -4 on the road at St. John's. It's a little scary, though, why that line is so close. But I think Xavier is able to pull it out after a big win against Seton Hall, and they're up there quite high in the rankings, and they deserve it. Minnesota plus 4.5 over Iowa. Quite simply, I think Minnesota is a better team. Yes, you're going to Carver Hawkeye Arena. I think Minnesota's a better basketball team, and they beat the LaSalle College High School graduate Fran McCaffrey, the head coach of the Iowa Hawkeyes. Finally, Penn State Nittany Lions, plus 13 on the road at the Breslin Center against a reeling Michigan State team, losing games. And listen, there's nothing good about it, but they're reeling, and they also have a lot going on at that institution, a lot of other distractions. So I think that Penn State, off a huge win against Ohio State, and I continue to ride those Nittany Lions because they got me big points last week with the straight-up upset of Ohio State after being, I believe, a 10-point dog in that one. That one will help. Let's keep riding on the Nittany Lion train. So those are my picks for this week.
Sticking with your Nittany Lions, huh?
Yes.
Just
sticking with
riding.
Sticking with Sam Ficken, like the old kicker there. And then game of the week for you, me, and the fans. We already got one pick on this one already. How did he know? Chris Mugler. He's got Bird Gang by 17. Super Bowl pick. Who you got?
That's going to be a tough one, Bob. I always find it difficult to pick against Tom Brady. Now, you and I know our beloved Buffalo Bills in the same division as the New England Patriots. It seems like it's a given 2 losses every single game. Every single year.
They're in the same division, but they are not in the same league.
Yeah. No, I know. Now, I think the one weakness of Tom Brady and really any other quarterback is when you're able to get to him. And the Philadelphia Eagles are the best team to do that. Their defensive line is incredible. I think they can disrupt Tom Brady early. I think they can get to him often. And when you get to him often, he gets uncomfortable. And I think that's the only way that you can beat Tom Brady. That's the only way I've seen anybody beat Tom Brady, really. And I do like the Eagles. I think Nick Foles is playing incredible right now. I think the supporting cast that they've built around him in Philadelphia is incredible. And, can't even imagine when this team gets Carson Wentz back next year. I like Philadelphia to go up to Minneapolis and finally bring home that Super Bowl.
I like him as well, to be honest with you. They do have the best defensive line in football right now, and the offensive line has responded in a huge way. I mean, Minnesota's defense was unbelievable coming into that game. Nick Foles was able to get the ball out. It was a good game plan, and the offensive line protected him while also getting the running game going as well. Everything was working for the Eagles that night. Tough not to be prisoner of the moment, and I understand that. Do I want to pick the Patriots? I really don't. I really don't. I mean, this year, nothing about them struck me as this being one of their best teams. Now, they could easily go and win this game. They got all the way there. Gronk, what's his status?
He'll play.
He'll play. Who guards him? Malcolm Jenkins, Ronald Darby. Ronald Darby's very physical. It's tough. A linebacker shouldn't be guarding him.
Yeah, I think you got to put Malcolm Jenkins on him. He's a little more physical than Darby. Darby more of a speed guy, but he can be physical. Absolutely.
He can and has. I think I like the Eagles. Something I struggle with it. I'm not a contrarian by trade. I'm not a contrarian by trade, but I just see a lot of people unequivocally picking the Eagles. I actually think they win the game. I really do.
They're certainly the better overall team.
Better O-line and D-line.
Absolutely, and that's the way that you build a team. I really love what the Eagles have done with their offensive line and defensive line. I mean, talk about Fletcher Cox, you got Barnett this year in the draft, and you talk about the O-line, you got Lane Johnson, obviously Jason Peters out now, but you got Kelsey. You're just really, really strong line. A lot of people talk about the Alshon Jeffrey acquisition, the Torrey Smith acquisition, although he, has had his moments this year, hasn't been great. But it's really, it starts in the trenches. Carson Wentz really came out and played well this year before he got injured. But you see with a guy like Nick Foles taking over and still doing the job, it really starts with those guys in the trenches. And if they're able to give him space, you got the defensive line that's not giving the other quarterback any space. And that is really just the difference. And, if you're comfortable in the pocket, you have a much better chance of getting the ball out where you want it to go and obviously a better chance of winning the game. So I think for those reasons, I like the Eagles over the Pats. And, you just always have to think twice about picking against the Pats because they have Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, and that's really all it is.
One misconception about Tom Brady that I just seem to hear, or maybe people know it, they just don't state it clearly enough or descriptively enough. They say something to the extent of, once you get Tom Brady moving, you're in trouble. And I get that, right? But Tom Brady is also, while he's not wonderfully athletic, we had a couple folks talking about his combine. Yeah, okay, he wasn't great at the combine. His lateral movement in the pocket is very good. He can also step up in the pocket if there's ends coming off the edge and the pocket kind of moves up on him, and he can kind of move off that as they're coming around the outside, create room. When he starts moving backwards, and I know that's not rocket science, but when Brady starts taking a step or two backwards, that's when it's over. That's where the edge is gonna lose its seal. That's where he's not gonna have the angle. That's where the defensive linemen are able to get after him. But it is important to not just pin those ears back and go way around the top. Really bull rushing and just collapsing that pocket so that Brady has to take a step back versus laterally or forward is where the difference comes and where they can win this game.
Yeah, that's where Fletcher Cox comes into play. He's one of the best in the NFL in doing that, bull rushing, pounding right through the middle, being able to get right into that area where he likes to step up. While you want your defensive ends and Chris Long and Barnett to come and rush the outside, you really need to close in on that middle part. And I think Fletcher Cox is going to be a huge difference in this game for the Eagles.
Yeah, so that's our thoughts on the Super Bowl. It's our game of the week. Of course, this is the Villanova Basketball Report, so we appreciate everybody being on. We're going to post our V's and O's segment separately. Of course, you can always see the podcast of this on Facebook and on our Periscope, which is on our Twitter account. And then we have our YouTube channel where we will post all of these shows after the fact. And I think we're having a lot of positive momentum with V's and O's, and we're going to post a compilation of those at the end of the year. We can go back and kind of see how this team has developed from an X's and O's of E's and O's perspective by the end of the year. And I think by the time we get to March and we run through all these, I think we're going to see a little difference when you see, okay, no Phil Booth. This was week 1 without Phil. How did this continue to develop both offensively and defensively? So once again, appreciate everybody being with us this evening. For Kevin Long, I'm Bob Long, signing off here from our Philadelphia studios, and we will see you next week. Go Cats!